Hi everyone. Today I'm going to record the translation I've made of the Workers' Party of Russia program. I'm a member of the Workers' Party of Russia, and we've got a channel called the Workers' Academy Fund. It's got about 50,000 subscribers, not sure, and a link to English videos will be in the description below. And for now I'm just going to read aloud the text, hopefully all of it. Sorry for poor quality of the video. I'm about 30 kilometers away from the nearest cell tower, so I need the internet connection here is slow and expensive. Internet is expensive for this type of connection. So, anyways, you won't need the video. The text is discernible. You can see the letters. And okay, here goes. The Workers' Party of Russia. It's called RPR. In Russian, the Russian abbreviation is RPR. Okay, so about the Workers' Party of Russia. Proletarians of all countries unite. The Workers' Party of Russia, founded at the Congress in Nizhny Novgorod on 4th of December 1993 as the Workers' and Peasants' Party of Russia, and transformed at the 7th Congress on 11th of June 2000 into the Workers' Party of Russia, is the party of the working class. The working class is objectively, most fully and consistently interested in the destruction of all social oppression. Being by its position the only revolutionary class of the epoch, it's called upon to lead the struggle of the workers for a system of social equality, communism. Today, it is the struggle to save Russia from devastation and its people from destruction, to liberate them from exploitation, and to lead the Russian society to the path of socialist development, to establish justice, to overcome social inequality, not by making everyone equally poor, but on the basis of the growth of everyone's wealth. The struggle of the working class, of the workers, is victorious if they are aware of their objective interests and organize themselves with the aim of realizing them, the interests. For this purpose, we need a party of the working class, which unites workers, employees, intellectuals who defend the interests of the working class and therefore of all workers. The Workers' Party of Russia, founders E.P. Timofeev, V.I. Shishkaryov, D.V. Igoshin and others, acts on the rights of a public association. Its immediate task is to help labor collectives and trade union organizations in the struggle for better working conditions and better wages for workers. How to join the Workers' Party of Russia? Anyone who wants to join the RPR must do the following. Make a commitment to undergo study at the Red University of the Workers' Academy Foundation. For English translations on YouTube, please type Workers' Academy Foundation, Russia, Red University, or type in Russian Фонд Рабочей Академии Красный Университет. Some of the videos can be translated in the subtitle section. Secondly, study and accept the program and statuses of the RPR. Thirdly, make a commitment to distribute the newspaper Народная Правда to the workers of their region. So you get up at about 5 o'clock in the morning and go to a factory or a plant. Just stand near the near the entrance, on the limits, on the borders of the plant's territory, It's better to study where it is in advance, of course, so that the security wouldn't try to chase you away. Okay, fourth thing. Write an application to the regional organization of the RPR, and if there is no such organization in your region, then to the Leningrad St. Petersburg organization of the Public Association Working Party of Russia, with your full name, home address, phone number, and email. Okay, here goes the program itself. The Workers' Party of Russia program. Section 1. By way of struggle and accomplishment. 1. In the vanguard of world civilization. Common ownership of land and other means of production, common labor in common interests, are natural for man as a social being. The development of mankind began with primitive communal communism, a system based on communal property and social equality, but with extremely underdeveloped productive forces. The commodity exchange that arose between communities, linking them into a single society, gradually decomposed primitive communal communism and led to the domination of private property. Although slavery, feudalism, and capitalism had private property as their basis, the communalization of production continued, and thus progress was made in world civilization. Under capitalism, the social productive forces developed to such an extent that the production processes of individual commodity producers merged into one social productive process. Monopolistic capitalism led to the undermining of the commodity economy, market economy, made possible and necessary the revolutionary resolution of the contradiction between the public nature of production and private appropriation. The time is ripe for a transition to a system based on communal property, in which the benefits of civilization become the property of each and every member of society and are not usurped by the exploiting class. To realize this transition, to free society from class antagonisms by building socialism, has become the objective historical vocation of the working class and its allies. Socialism is underdeveloped, immature, incomplete communism, its lowest phase. Communis means common, everyone's. In its first phase, communism inevitably bears, in all respects, the imprints of the old capitalist system from which it emerged. Here, every person is objectively interested both in the growth of social wealth and in increasing their own share in it, even if only to the detriment of the interests of all the other members of society. This contradiction of economic interests gives rise to both a constructive communist tendency towards the development of everyone on the basis of the growth of common wealth, and a destructive petty bourgeois tendency towards the enrichment of some members of society at the expense of others. The constructive tendency is potentially stronger, and this preponderance increases with the progress of communalization. However, it is realized only within the conscious, active, and organized struggle of the workers, led by the working class, for the development of socialism and against petty bourgeoisie. This is a specific form of class struggle in the first phase of communism. In the process of development on its own basis, communism is freed from the traces of capitalism in economic, moral, and mental relations and passes into its highest phase, full communism. The movement towards communism is natural, and all mankind has to make this journey to pass through the lowest stage of communism and then enter its highest stage, thus achieving a truly human society. Progress is carried out the more successfully, the more conscious and organized is the struggle, the historical creativity of the working class and its allies. The working class of Russia, the weakest link of imperialism, was the first in the 20th century to realize the communist revolution. The purposefulness and organization of its struggle was ensured by the party of the working class. In our country, where the economy of monopolies was combined with the remnants of serfdom, the party of the working class was born as a social democratic party, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. In the course of the consistent struggle of its communist Bolshevik faction for the fulfillment of the first party program, against acquiescence with the exploiters, against the betrayal of the interests of the working class by the social democratic parties of Europe in 1914, against a sophisticated and therefore particularly dangerous variety of this betrayal, political centrism, the Russian Communist Party, Bolsheviks, was forged, capable of organizing the victorious struggle of the workers for socialism. In an effort to unite forces in the revolutionary struggle, the Russian working class created the Soviets, which initially emerged as united organs of the strike struggle. While the bourgeois and petty bourgeois parties refused to recognize the Soviets as organs of state power, the communists sought their full power, considering the Soviets as an organizational form of the dictatorship of the proletariat. See Lenin, Complete Works in Russian, Volume 36, page 196. The working class, in alliance with the poorest peasantry, having carried out the October Revolution, resolved this dispute by establishing the power of the Soviets, Soviet power. The RCPB wrote in its program, "The Soviet state brings this state apparatus closer to the masses, also by the fact that the electoral unit and the basic cell of the state becomes not a territorial district, but a production unit, plant, factory." See V.I. Lenin, Volume 38, pages 425-426. For the first time in history, workers were able to elect deputies in factory collectives and recall them at any time to control the organs of state power, thus ensuring the subordination of the state to their interests. The highest, most progressive form of democracy and of the workers was established. The October Revolution of October 1917 in Russia implemented the dictatorship of the proletariat, which began with the support of the poorest peasantry or semi-proletariat to build the foundations of communist society. See program of RCPB. Having defended Soviet power in the Civil War, the workers and peasants of Russia used it to liberate themselves from exploitation, to build socialism. The uneven economic development of the various countries under imperialism, the antagonism of the imperialist predators who were at each other's throats in the First World War, the rise of the revolutionary movement in the world, made it possible to build socialism in Russia despite the multiple preponderance of the forces of the world bourgeoisie. By adopting its second program in 1919, the party aimed the workers at building socialism. The Soviets' taking of the decisive means of production into the ownership of the working class state marked the beginning of the liberation of the people from exploitation. By establishing a system of self-government and planned management, the working class subordinated production to the interests of the workers. The policy aimed at the elimination of the basis of exploitation was opposed not only by the bourgeoisie, but also its elements, the desire to give less and worse to society and to take more from it. The working class waged a struggle with these elements within its own ranks and within the party, where petty bourgeoisie manifested itself in the form of various kinds of deviations, in the form of attempts to escape the obligation to serve its class, to put the party above the class, and to force the class to serve the party. Owing to the pervasive influence of petty bourgeois tendencies, the dictatorship of the working class from the very beginning turned out to have bureaucratic perversions. Their consequences were the liquidation of the factory committees as primary cells of Soviet power and the refusal from the top in the second half of the 1930s, in violation of the program of the RCPB, to elect the organs of power through the labor collectives as a key element of the self-government of the working people. In essence, this meant the undermining of Soviet power as an organizational form of working class dictatorship. The preconditions appeared for the formation of a parliamentary system, detached from the labor collectives and allowing deputies elected from territories to ignore the will of the working people virtually without the risk of being recalled. The lack of control of the state power over the labor collectives and its independence from them led to the belittling of the role of the workers in government and to violations of socialist legality. The government could act in the interests of the working class only insofar as these interests were expressed by the Communist Party. In the struggle against the negative tendencies that perverted the normal course of the construction of socialism, a cultural revolution, industrialization, and collectivization were carried out in the country. The working day was shortened, free medicine and education were introduced, exploitation, unemployment, destitution, and insecurity were eliminated. The national question was successfully resolved on the basis of the unification of workers in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The country developed at the fastest pace and by the beginning of the 40s had moved from the pre-revolutionary 5th place to the 2nd place in the world in terms of the most important economic indicators. The systematic equipping of industry with advanced technology laid the foundation for the growth of the people's well-being and ensured the country's defense capability. The Soviet Union, having made a decisive contribution to the defeat of German fascism, saved world civilization. Having restored the destroyed economy in the shortest possible time, our people managed to solve a number of major tasks of socialist development in the post-war period. In the 50s, the country became one of the most educated in the world, with advanced science and culture. In just 10 years, the USSR moved from 5th to third place among the world's major powers in terms of industrial productivity, ahead of Britain, Germany, and Japan. Supremacy in space exploration was therefore natural. The people's welfare was steadily increasing, prices were falling, wages were rising. The industrial working week was reduced by 18 hours between 1917 and 1961. The conditions for the development of the workers were improving. In this way, the communist nature of socialism was revealed, and the people of labor became convinced that communism was not just an ideal or a prospect, but was manifested in everyday life. The socio-economic transformations in the USSR, which were improving the lives of the working people, and the systematic nature of these transformations have accelerated the course of world development. The international communist and labor movement and the liberation struggle of the peoples of colonial countries have intensified. The bourgeoisie of the leading capitalist states was forced to give in to the labor movement and provide workers with certain social guarantees. It began to make increasing use of the experience of planned management and the active participation of workers in the rationalization of production accumulated in the USSR. In that part of the world which is still capitalist, the process of communalization has continued and continues in an antagonistic form. A bunch of rich imperialist countries are trying to overcome their social plagues by neo-colonial robbery of the rest of the world, as a result of which hundreds of millions of people are impoverished and starving. At the same time, the material prerequisites of a new, non-antagonistic order, which undermine capitalism, continue to mature in the capitalist countries. This is expressed in the following: the rapid development of scientific and technological progress, potentially allowing to ensure the well-being of all; the transition to state capitalist monopolies capable of systematically mastering advanced technologies; the growth of investment in science and education, exceeding the rate of investment directly in production. Capitalism cannot escape the revolutionary transformation into socialism. 2. To overcome the crisis the country is going through. The critical situation that developed in the USSR at the turn of the 1990s was largely due to a gradual change in the objective balance of forces, representing on the one hand the creative communist tendency in the life of society, and on the other hand the destructive petty bourgeois tendency. The human and material losses suffered by our people in Great Patriotic War, their titanic exertion during the period of reconstruction of the national economy, the exhausting struggle to overcome the US monopoly on nuclear weapons, and to achieve military strategic parity, have extremely weakened the creative forces, which has contributed to the activation of the carriers of the anti-communist tendency. Moreover, the solution of a number of major tasks of socialist development led to the illusion among the party and the people of the non-contradictory progress after the elimination of class antagonisms. This illusion of rapid without struggle, achievement of the highest phase of communism was enshrined in the Third Party Program adopted in 1961, which demobilized the party, the working class, and the workers. Which demobilized the party, the working class, and the workers. The program contained a revisionist rejection of the dictatorship of the proletariat and declared the nationwide character of such purely class institutions as the party and the state, thus creating a cover for their petty bourgeois degeneration. The negative tendencies and abuses that took place were explained in subjectivist terms. The cult of personality, quote unquote. The task of reviving the power of the Soviets, formed by the workers' collectives, was not even put forward, and the workers, deprived of self-government and disunited organizationally, were ideologically disarmed in the face of the intensified element of petty bourgeoisie. The strengthening of private property tendencies prepared the economic reform of 1965, which had a destructive character. By orienting enterprises towards sales volume in rubles and towards profit, it stimulated group egoism, materially encouraged producers to produce less but more expensive products, created shortages and inflation, and intensified the non-equivalence of the economic relations between the city and the countryside. Through the efforts of economists and managers who stood up in defense of the directly social character of the socialist planned economy, the negative effect of the pursuit of profit was largely weakened. However, the orientation towards profit continued to destroy the economy. In the created environment of uncontrollability and wastefulness, shadow capital began to develop and corruption grew. The connivance with private ownership tendencies led to a slowdown and subsequent stoppage of the society's progress. The imposition on the party of a refusal to fight for the development of socialism was disguised and politically consolidated by the proclamation of so-called quote-unquote developed socialism. Attempts to establish a dialectical understanding of the development of socialist society as a process of struggle between creative and negative tendencies were ignored by the party leadership. The pernicious thesis of quote-unquote developed socialism, which perverts Lenin's doctrine of socialism as immature, underdeveloped, incomplete communism, obscures the contradictions of socialism and paralyzes the activity of creative forces. This was included in the new version of the CPSU program approved by the 27th Congress. Soon after the 27th Congress, under the pressure of petty bourgeois and bourgeois elements and their representatives in the CPSU, the communist strategy of the party leadership was abandoned altogether and replaced by the course of perestroika as a transition to a different social order, capitalism. The bourgeois degeneration of the CPSU leadership and its nurturing of bourgeois and petty bourgeois parties under the slogan of political pluralism allowed to complete the establishment of the parliamentary system as a form of dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, which was contrary to the essence of the Soviets. At the same time, the party state leadership sabotaged the initiative of the workers to revive Soviet power limiting the election of deputies through labor collectives to isolated experiments at the district level. Nothing was done to make the representative bodies of labor collectives the primary links of Soviet power. The uncontrolled state power, with the blessing of the anti-communist leadership of the CPSU, under the sign of transition to the market, pursued an anti-people policy of price increases, privatization, encouragement of local and foreign transnational capital. Foreign policy was also subordinated to the latter. The capitalization of the country caused the growth of bourgeois nationalism and bloody interethnic clashes. All this was presented as a movement towards humane democratic socialism, quote unquote, which in reality was just another verbal screen for the destroyers of socialism. The communist and patriotic forces in the party and the people not only understood the perniciousness of the quote-unquote new economic and political course, but also practically opposed it. They sought the expulsion from the party of the quote-unquote architects of perestroika and the shapeshifters at all levels, and created organizations to resist the imminent threat: the United Front of Workers and the Initiative Movement of Communists. Despite resistance to the anti-people course, the ruling clique actually cancelled the USSR constitution. The crisis deepened and gave rise to a series of conflicts between the central power and the republics, between the legislative and executive powers. The events of August 1991 allowed the bourgeois forces to openly pursue a course of capitalization of the country. In September-October 1993, the anti-people ruling regime trampled on the constitution of the Russian Federation, shot the supreme constitutional authority, dispersed the Soviets of People's Deputies, thus slipping at that moment to a fascist dictatorship. The crisis in the USSR in the late 1980s and early 1990s was an acute conflict between the foundations of socialism and the capitalization of the country, imposed not only from within, but also from the outside. It was a forced breaking the fundamental foundations of people's life, introduction of reactionary market privatization programs, purposeful ruin of agriculture, destruction of science, culture, industry, the armed forces, bringing the people to a state of shock. It was a price hike, depriving the workers of their social gains and confidence in the future, plunging them into poverty, and inciting social and national discord by the new exploiters. It was the fulfillment of the long-standing plan of the imperialist powers to dismember the USSR and Russia into a number of dwarf states, to push them into the category of third world countries, so-called third world countries, and to plunder our peoples without hindrance. A mortal danger hangs over our motherland. The destruction that has engulfed all spheres of society irrefutably proves the reactionary nature of the introduction to capitalism. Continued movement backwards threatens the loss of national state independence of Russia, unheard of disasters for the people, and civil war. In order to overcome the crisis that has engulfed the country, it is necessary to free society from the oppression of capital and to move again towards socialist construction in our country. The struggle of the working class, of the workers, for a way out of the crisis through the revival of Soviet power and socialism has solid objective foundations. In their class struggle, the creative socialist forces are based on the natural development of the social character of production and objectively oppose the reactionary tendency towards the isolation of republics, regions, branches, etc. The workers are economically interested in subordinating modern scientific and technological progress to the law of use value, which requires saving labor, lowering prices, and increasing the free time of workers, and which, as a result of the socialist revolution, is replacing the basic law of capitalism, the law of value. Representing the interests of social progress and forming the majority of the population, the working class, the workers, are potentially stronger than the bourgeoisie, which is a minority trying to stop the wheel of history. Our people have been committed for centuries to the struggle for a just common cause, and for them, communism is a truly patriotic, national idea. There is a growing awareness of the severity of the contradictions and a growing determination to achieve at all costs a solution to the problems of life, not to the detriment of the laborers. Social, political, and patriotic organizations have been set up in the country to protect the interests of workers and the independence of our motherland. Organizations to defend the independence of our motherland. In 1991, the communists united in the Russian Communist Workers' Party. After the events of October 1993, the Workers' and Peasants' Party of Russia was established, which transformed itself into the Workers' Party of Russia. This gives the working class, the laboring people, the opportunity to wage an organized struggle for their fundamental interests. The working class rises up to fight for its interests. The most important direction of the party's work is the work in trade unions. Workers create their own trade unions, acting in their interests, uniting in the Federation of Trade Unions of Russia. Workers' trade unions, strike unions, people's committees, and other forms of public initiative have given millions of people the experience of self-organization. This successful struggle for the payment of delayed wages and raising the level of their real content to the level of the cost of labor, the conclusion of progressive collective agreements against the abolition of benefits and guarantees for workers and labor veterans have shown that if we act consciously, actively, and in an organized manner, it is possible to improve our lives. Section 2. Towards workers' unity for the free development of all. The struggle for the improvement of life, welfare, and free all-round development of all members of society cannot be postponed until the working class has won political power. 1. Tasks of the workers' struggle under the conditions of the capitalist system. The Workers' Party of Russia aims, under the existing conditions, to render all possible assistance to the workers in uniting in trade unions and solving the following tasks. In the field of labor relations: setting the price of labor force, wages, of Russian workers at the level of its cost, 45 to 150,000 rubles per month in 2007 prices. Indexation of wages in line with price growth and increasing the level of real wage content, which stimulates labor productivity growth. Setting the minimum wage at a level not lower than 40% of the national average, in any case not lower than the scientifically determined subsistence minimum. Bringing the share of wages in production costs up to the level of developed countries. Setting the share of the permanent part of wages, tariff and related payments at the level of at least 80%. Increasing the payment for overtime work, work on weekends and public holidays, night and evening work. Establishment of guarantees of labor remuneration in monetary form. Increasing the free time of workers by reducing the working day to 6 hours and introducing a 30-hour working week without reducing earnings, as well as by increasing the amount of paid holidays. Ensuring real economic guarantees of full employment through the creation of new, highly productive jobs with favorable working conditions using labor productivity growth, not to dismiss workers, but to reduce their working hours and increase their free time, and developing a system of professional training and retraining. Limiting the practice of concluding fixed-term labor contracts. Approval by the employer and the trade union of decisions affecting the interests of workers. Recognition of the right of workers to suspend work in the event of non-payment of wages and violations of labor safety rules, and certification of workplaces for working conditions. Granting each trade union the right to conclude a collective agreement in the interests of its members, validity of the collective agreement until a new one is concluded. Conclusion of professional tariff agreements. Free access by trade unions to information, including information constituting a trade secret, relating to the economic situation of organizations, and the right of trade unions to monitor the economic activities of organizations. Exercising the right of trade unions to engage in collective labor disputes and strikes, including solidarity strikes, political and national economic strikes. Adoption of the labor code developed by the Workers' Academy Foundation, which embodies the advanced domestic and foreign achievements in the development of citizens' labor rights. Reduction of the property gap between the rich and the poor. Implementation of active labor protection measures. Development of a system of independent labor inspectors. Introduction of criminal sanctions for failure to comply with court decisions on labor relations. Equal pay for equal work. Agreement with trade unions on wage differentiation. Protection of the labor rights of migrants and stateless persons, including by admitting them to trade union organizations united with the local workers and establishing equal working conditions and pay for all. Criminalizing employers in cases of discrimination, including in hiring and unlawful dismissal. In the field of national economy, taxes and finance. Increase in the real content of wages, including by bringing nominal wages to the cost of labor force, based on the reduction of labor costs. Reduction of labor costs, prices, tariffs for electricity, railway transportation, utilities, etc., is a result of the growth of labor productivity through the introduction of scientific and technological progress. Circulation of natural rent in favor of the entire population of the country. Nationalization of the largest corporations, as well as the enterprises of those capitalists who do not comply with the depreciation norms and underestimate the price of labor force. The introduction of progressive income taxation. Increasing taxes on the excess profits of monopolistic companies. Elimination of offshore zones. Fair distribution of taxes between the federal center and the regions. Tax incentives for knowledge intensive industries. Stimulation of knowledge intensive industries and fundamental research. Development of the system of state programs and orders in the city and procurement in the countryside. Increasing duties on imported products similar to those produced by domestic manufacturers. Russia's non-accession or withdrawal from the World Trade Organization. Preservation of the non-commercial nature of the social sphere. Restoration and development of social benefits and guarantees for the population. Abandoning the policy of paying off foreign debts and accumulating gold and currency reserves in the detriment of social programs. In the field of education and health. Development of universal free education and accessible quality healthcare. Establishment of public sector employees' salaries not lower than the industry average. Preservation of all federal and regional allowances. Increasing the salaries of specialists with increasing qualifications. Preservation of benefits for rural public sector employees. Granting the right to a long service pension. Federal funding of the entire education and health care system, from rural schools and outpatient clinics to metropolitan education and healthcare industries and healthcare institutions. Inclusion in the special labor record of work in any institution or education, healthcare and upbringing, regardless of its departmental affiliation. Refusal to transfer funds allocated for healthcare to private insurance companies. In the field of pensions, transition to a solidarity pension system, voluntary nature of funded pensions. Establishment of the minimum pension at a level above the subsistence minimum. Strengthening the importance of length of service in calculating pensions. Returning to the labor record the years taken away by the state from employers. Maternity leave, military service, preferential service for work in the north, etc. Removal of the restrictive coefficient in the ratio of earnings when calculating pensions, it is taking into account the real contribution of employees to the development of society. Indexation of pensions and pension savings in case of price growth. Establishment of budget guarantees of pension savings and state guarantees of employer contributions to citizens' pension accounts. Elimination of favorable pensions for deputies and officials. Establishment of a uniform pension law for all. In the field of housing policy. Development of housing and communal services in the interests of the population. Ensuring financial transparency and accountability of utility monopolies to consumers. Preservation and restoration of state, municipal ownership of communal monopolies. Enterprises supplying electricity, heat, water and gas. Installation of metering devices in residential buildings at budgetary expense in order to prevent the transfer of unreasonable costs of utility companies to the population. Reduction of payments in case of low quality supply of public utilities. state financing of capital expenditures in the housing and utilities sector, including the development of housing construction for the poor, free exchange of housing regardless of its ownership, development of state housing construction programs. In the field of national relations, realization of equal rights of peoples irrespective of people irrespective of nationality, combating manifestations of racism, nationalism and racial discrimination, affirmation of the spirit of patriotism and proletarian internationalism in labor collectives, developing international relations with trade unions and labor movements in other countries of the world. In the field of women's and youth rights, creating a public atmosphere of establishing social equality between men and women in the distribution of free time, wages and political representation, social support for the family as a unit of society, raising child allowances to the subsistence minimum, provision of free, accessible sports and cultural services. In the field of environment, support for environmental technologies, state incentives for the use of renewable energy sources, introduction of environmental pollution charges, construction of industrial projects only in the presence of environmental expertise with mandatory public participation, refusal to bury foreign radioactive waste in Russia, retention of state ownership of all natural resources, forests, water resources, subsoil, etc., transition from the export of unprocessed forests to the export of woodworking products, re-establishment of the State Committee on Ecology, introduction of mandatory environmental audits. In the field of strengthening defense capability and the rights of the military, promoting the creation of a combat-ready army using the advanced developments of the military-industrial complex, prohibiting the use of the army against the people, preventing and eliminating localized conflict hotbeds on the territory of the country and in the immediate vicinity of its borders, which could escalate into large-scale hostilities, giving reason for military intervention from outside. Social protection of servicemen, persons liable for military duty, and members of their families. Eliminating and publicly investigating cases of non-statutory relations in military collectives involving representatives of the public and bringing the results of the work to the detection and punishment of those responsible. Adaptation of servicemen to civilian life and strengthening of social guarantees for people who have been wounded or injured in the course of their service. In the political sphere, expanding the rights of Russian workers, adoption of a law on the responsibility of state and its officials to citizens, including for inaction and red tape, exercising the right to recall deputies on the basis of the principle of election through labor collectives, which makes recall practically feasible. Formation of the Federation Council by election of its members by citizens of the respective region, and expansion of the powers of the Federal Assembly, especially in the field of control over the state's finances. Strengthening the system of real local self-government, including full financial transparency of the budget for citizens, public discussion of budget allocation, and the possibility of recall of officials and deputies by the population. Lowering the barrier for political parties to enter the legislative bodies up to the introduction of a proportional system of political party representation. Ensuring free access of every person to objective and reliable information, use of modern means of communication by workers, state financial support of the rural press, availability of different points of view on issues of public importance, freedom of the press, provision of free premises for public organizations, preservation of the secular character of the state and the education system, respect for the right to hold meetings and demonstrations, promoting the development of public, including trade union, organizations. As these tasks are accomplished, the workers will strengthen their ability to establish their Soviet power, so that the aim of social production will be to ensure the full welfare and free all-round development of all members of society. 2. To revive the Soviet power. The realization of the public prerequisites for the free development of all presupposes the revival of Soviet power. In the labor collectives, with the support and on the basis of trade unions, despite all obstacles, self-governing bodies, strike committees, workers' councils, councils of collectives, etc., will be created, designed to become the basic cells of the Soviets. The RPR, the Workers' Party of Russia, should make this initiative widespread through its primary organizations and by means of mass agitation and propaganda. At the same time, it should be made clear that limiting the workers' movement to this stage threatens to reduce the self-government bodies of the labor collectives to the role of powerless appendages of bourgeois parliaments. In the regions of the country, on the initiative of the people from below, workers' councils and councils of employees will be set up to establish control over production and distribution, to organize the joint activity and mutual assistance of the collectives of industrial and agricultural enterprises. Supporting and developing this popular initiative, the party is obliged to push for the widespread unification of representatives of the self-government bodies of labor and military collectives into district, city and regional councils of workers and councils of employees, to give all non-working citizens the opportunity to elect their deputies through the councils of citizens at their place of residence. It is necessary to promote the delegation of deputies from the respective city and regional Soviets to the Russian Workers' Committee, to the Republican and all Russian Congresses of the Soviets of Workers and Soviets of Employees. At the bicameral Congresses of the Soviets, it is necessary to elect executive committees whose members, like all other deputies, can be recalled at any time by the labor collective that elected them to its self-governing body. The Working Party of Russia will seek the full authority of the Soviets as organs of working-class dictatorship and the adoption of a constitution for a socialist Russia that affirms the power of the Soviets and excludes the institution of the presidency. The Working Party of Russia should help unite labor and military collectives and law enforcement collectives through interaction and cooperation of their representatives in the workers' councils, including in the protection of public order. If this unity is ensured, no one will be able to unleash a civil war. The unity of the workers of different nationalities, which is the cornerstone of the Working Party of Russia national policy, can only be formed on a purely voluntary basis, so the communists recognize the right of every nation to self-determination up to and including secession. While recognizing this right, the party is obliged at the same time to explain to the workers of all nationalities of our country that they can be free only by uniting into a single union, that it is in their fundamental interests to join the Soviet Federation. The Working Party of Russia will promote the unification of the Soviet republics into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics by convening an all-union tricameral Congress of the Soviets of Workers, Soviets of Peasants, Soviets of Specialists and Employees. Struggling for the power of the working class, the Working Party of Russia, through the means of mass agitation and propaganda, work in the trade unions, and through its deputy factions in the Soviets, must actively influence the elaboration and implementation of the political line and the formation of the cadre of the state apparatus. Cadre of the state apparatus. To this end, the Working Party of Russia will assist the Komsomol in the education of young people and cooperate with those parties, organizations, movements, and non-party comrades who actually defend the interests of the people of labor. The party must fight for the consistent realization of the political and socio-economic rights of the workers. Workers' councils and employees' councils must own and control all means of mass agitation and propaganda. Party members are called upon to assist the workers in electing worthy deputies, in formulating precepts for them, in assisting them in monitoring their activities, and if necessary, in organizing their recall. By establishing schools of workers' self-government, political universities, it is necessary to promote the universal participation of the workers in state administration, above all in the workers' control of production and distribution of manufactured products. In this way, bureaucracy and abuses will be eradicated, and new forces will be prepared for the activation of the Soviets and the improvement of the state apparatus. The eradication of bureaucracy will also be facilitated by the establishment of a direct dependence on the remuneration of the labor, of state leaders and employees, of the administrative bodies, on the standard of living of the people. The revival of Soviet power to save Russia from catastrophe is our minimum program. Only by reviving the Soviets, by uniting with their help all the progressive forces, will the workers stop the destruction and, taking a constructive course, ensure the subordination of all spheres of social life to their interests. 3. To develop the economy in the interests of the working people. Fundamentals of the Working Party of Russia economic program. In order to guarantee the increase of the people's welfare, the Soviet power must interest every worker in the growth of labor productivity, provide effective stimulation of scientific and technical progress, its systematic implementation and use in the interest of the workers. Paragraph 3.1. To assert workers' ownership of the means and results of production. The Workers' Party of Russia advocates that the labor collectives, creating primary cells of the Soviets, uniting in associations of Soviet enterprises in Russia, dispose of the means and results of their production in the public interest. Overcoming the higher nature of labor requires the transition of the labor collectives to the employment of administration with the payment of its work in direct dependence on the earnings of the members of the collective. At the same time, the party will defend a careful attitude to the cadres of economic managers. The ongoing Sovietization of the economy presupposes the predominant development of the Soviet form of public ownership, support for collective forms of public support for collective forms of public ownership, and excludes the course of privatization, which alienates workers from the bulk of the means of production. The question of replacing private property with public property was correctly decided by the people, and not in parliamentary debates, but by the revolutionary struggle. This was confirmed by the victory in the Civil War and the Great Patriotic War. Bearing in mind the people's attitude to the land as a mother and sacred thing that is not traded, the parasitic nature of the appropriation of absolute land rent by private owners, the party advocates the destruction of private ownership of land, the free development of all effective forms of economic management on the people's land. The land should be managed by the Soviets of the workers. The party will strive to ensure that the workers organized in trade unions, with the help of their Soviets, close the channels of parasitic, non-labor, exploitative enrichment, and ensure a fair distribution of the results of labor. For this purpose, it is necessary to unite all banks into a single Russian bank of the workers' councils, to stop paying interest on large bank deposits, to abolish anonymous bearer deposits, to establish only one personal savings book for the depositor, and to carry out a monetary reform with re-registration of deposits and securities and one-to-one exchange of banknotes on presentation, starting from a certain amount, of a declaration of income, exchanging only labor income, to freeze prices with a view to their reduction, to introduce an effective progressive tax on the heritage of the laborer, to introduce a new tax on the income of the laborer, to freeze prices in order to move towards their reduction, to introduce a progressive tax on the income of the laborer, to introduce a new tax, to establish workers' self-determined collective control over all channels of distribution of food and industrial goods, to return to the people the means of production forcibly taken from them in the course of privatization, to restore the system of material and technical supply and provision of the population with consumer goods, and on this basis to overcome speculation, to organize support for collectivization, to promote the establishment of equivalent economic relations between the city and the countryside, and to overcome the price gouging of agricultural products. Ensuring workers' ownership of the products produced requires the monopoly of Soviet power over those foreign economic relations. It is necessary to freeze those treaties with foreign countries which are essentially bonded, ruinous for the country, to stop the sale of irreplaceable natural resources, the taking of loans on the security of land, not to expand the supply of gas and oil abroad until the gasification of the countryside and the necessary provision of agricultural production with fuel, to stop in our country the encouragement of the exploitation of quote-unquote cheap labor by capitalist monopolies, not to allow the transformation of our land into a graveyard of radioactive and other harmful wastes, to stop the exploitation of quote-unquote cheap so the next thing is, such is the program of priority anti-crisis measures of the Soviet power. Having realized them, the workers will be able to carry out scientific and technological progress with interest. Paragraph 3.2. Stimulate and systematically implement scientific and technological progress. Economic growth requires that workers be interested in increasing labor productivity. Accordingly, it is necessary to stop lowering rates and increasing production norms without re-equipping workplaces, which would guarantee an increase in earnings, and to exclude the reduction of tariff grades. Along with higher wages, highly productive labor should be encouraged by better equipment, more meaningful and creative work, more cultural and aesthetic benefits, and shorter working hours. Collectives have the right to use at their discretion the working time saved as a result of increased labor productivity, to shorten the working day, the working week, increase holidays, or to produce additional output, while paying for the time saved as overtime. It is necessary to ensure the orientation of self-financing incentives to reduce costs and prices. For this purpose, it is necessary to exclude from the number of fund-forming indicators profit, orienting enterprises to increase costs and prices. For enterprises, producing means of production as a target indicator should be set as an indicator of labor savings obtained when using this equipment by consumers, and encourage scientists, designers, engineers, technicians, workers, depending on the volume of these savings. Enterprises producing consumer goods should be set as a fund-forming indicator of self-sufficiency. At the amount of self-sufficiency, the amount of price reductions for manufactured products, which will interest collectives in increasing the output of consumer goods, reducing their cost and prices on the basis of labor productivity growth. This incentive procedure should be established by the law on the Soviet enterprise. The Working Party of Russia advocates the allocation in the structure of the economy, science, technology, and education of a strategic echelon for the centralized implementation of scientific and technological progress. This echelon is called upon to use the managerial and organizational experience accumulated by the defense industry and other technologically advanced industries to ensure the concentration of resources on the decisive areas of scientific and technological progress, and to bring the entire economy to the forefront of technology. The existence of a strategic echelon of centralized implementation of scientific and technological progress will allow for the systematic re-equipping of enterprises with such equipment that saves more labor than it costs to produce, improves conditions and increases labor productivity, and guarantees environmental protection technologies. The cycle of equipment fleet renewal should be brought to the period of equipment generation change. At the same time, it is required to systematically ensure advanced professional training and retraining of workers, i.e. effective full employment and the exclusion of unemployment. Scientific and technological progress should be aimed at improving the lives of the working people. Paragraph 3.3. The fruits of scientific and technological progress to the people of labor. The workers will only be able to fully benefit from the fruits of scientific and technological progress if the Soviets ensure the transparent elaboration and systematic implementation of a unified program for the socio-economic development of the country aimed at satisfying the reasonable needs of all members of society for consumer goods and overcoming the orientation of production towards the quote-unquote rich buyer, increasing the real incomes of workers primarily through systematic, economically justified price reductions and increased consumption from public funds, enrichment of the content of labor, improvement of its conditions and improvement of labor protection and safety equipment, the liberation of workers, especially women, from heavy, unskilled labor and work in harmful conditions, the elimination of night shifts in all but continuous production, and the improvement of the quality of consumer services at enterprises, canteens, locker rooms, showers, preventive clinics, etc. Reduction of the working day, working week, and increase in leave as the productivity of social labor increases. An increase in the proportion of free time outside working hours through the improvement and expansion of public catering and household services in urban and rural areas, and the use of modern household appliances. And on this basis, the liberation of women from the enslavement of the household. Reducing the impact of socio-economic inequality on the future of the younger generation, providing every child with a place in a free preschool institution, while reducing the workload of the teacher, giving priority to state provision of children's homes and boarding schools, providing free vouchers to pioneer camps, establishing child allowances in an amount that prevents the lowering of the parents' standard of living after the birth of a child, and providing comprehensive assistance to young families. Improving the situation of the elderly and infirm, increasing pensions in proportion to the growth of the average wage in the national economy, establishing such an order in future that the living standards of workers after retirement do not decline, providing everyone with the opportunity to work as hard as they can while maintaining their pensions and without reducing their wages. The abolition of rent for the use of housing within the norms established by the Soviets, with the introduction of payment for surplus housing at its full value, state financing and provision for the exchange of living space, the provision of a separate flat for each family, and a state solution to the problem of comfortable housing in the countryside. Priority development of public transport and improvement of the quality of its services, abolition of fares for urban and suburban transport, creation of a road network in rural areas at public expense, based on the production, domestic and cultural needs of the villagers. Equipping medical establishments with first-class equipment and paying medical personnel no less than the average wage for the national economy. Carrying out universal medical examinations, developing free medical care, and a transition to free medicines, providing preferential resort treatment for medical indications, and freeing society from socially caused diseases, alcoholism, drug addiction, AIDS, etc. Reproduction of the natural environment, improving people's living conditions. Establishing the share of expenditures in national income on public education, science and culture at a level higher than in advanced capitalist countries. Building schools, palaces and houses of pioneers and school children, educational and research institutes, philharmonic, concert and exhibition halls, palaces of culture, providing for the sphere of education, increasing the remuneration of workers employed in it, together with the growth of public labor productivity. Overcoming the existing socio-economic inequality between the city and the countryside, between republics, by improving the welfare of all citizens and peoples of Russia. 4. Towards social equality on the basis of free development of everyone. Socialism is the destruction of classes. V.I. Lenin. In the course of the development of socialism, the division of society into workers who are the direct producers of material goods and employees who are engaged mainly in mental labor is to be abolished. The legitimate way of moving towards social equality, liberation from the division of society into classes, is to increase public free time and use it as time for the free development of everyone, for their education, science, art, physical culture, participation in government. The solution of this task will be carried out under the conditions of forces and habits that lead to the degradation of the human personality. The practice of turning the growth of society's free time into the property of a few has taken root. the creation of conditions for the development of the abilities of all is hindered. Self-improvement has not yet become everyone's own motivation. To overcome these forces and habits, the party will support the struggle for the free, all-round development of each person. The struggle for the development of education, against its fee-paying nature, and against the immoral and untenable sorting of children at an early age, allegedly, quote-unquote, according to ability, borrowed from the bourgeois school. In order to individualize the approach to pupils, the number of pupils in classes and groups in all types of educational institutions should be brought down to 20, 25, and then to 10 to 15. Rural schools must be raised to the level of urban schools. Secondary education should organically combine the study of the sciences of inanimate and animate nature and society, include lessons in music and fine arts, physical education, and provide skills in productive labor. The school must be separated from the church and the church from the state. It is required to ensure that higher education is generally accessible and free of charge. The curricula of higher education institutions should be based on the achievements of science and the needs of social practice. In the future, higher education should become universal, which will allow everyone to master scientific achievements, will serve to free society from the socio-economic assignment of people to physical or mental labor. The party stands for freedom of creativity and freedom of criticism of its results, for the union of people of mental and physical labor. Service to the people is the moral duty of every individual. The scientific and engineering intellectuals are called upon to develop scientific and technical progress, to promote mass rationalization and invention, to reveal the regularities of social development, and promote their use, to form a dialectical materialist outlook, to explain the role of religion as reconciling workers with social oppression, and to fight bourgeois ideology. The Workers' Party of Russia will promote the development of culture and art, to rid culture of elitism and the masses of ignorance and false values of pseudo-culture mixed with commerce. Every person, especially the young, should be given the opportunity to enjoy the riches of world and national classics and to engage in amateur folk art. The party will strive to preserve and restore monuments of Russian history and culture, to return to the motherland spiritual historical values exported abroad, to promote the revival of the traditions of the traveling painters with the use of modern opportunities. The communists are in favor of the development and propaganda of the achievements of the national culture of every nation of Russia, with special care for the language, culture, and art of small-numbered peoples. The party will seek to make physical education and sport accessible to the people, especially young people, through state funding of this sphere, and will actively participate in the promotion of a healthy lifestyle. The Workers' Party of Russia proceeds from the premise that the free all-round development of man presupposes his high morality, or hers high morality. In a world where good fights against evil, in a world where good fights against evil, the advanced against the reactionary, a person cannot be considered moral if he or her caring only for his or her neighbors, quote-unquote neighbors, does not also care for society as a whole. If he is alienated from the struggle of the working class and its allies, for justice and happiness for all. The Workers' Party of Russia will promote the development of self-government of the people of labor, the participation of workers in state administration, and will work to overcome the division of society into those who govern and those who obey. The material basis for this is the transition, on the basis of the growth of labor productivity, to a 5-hour working day, with the obligation of the workers to devote 3 hours daily, paid at the average wage, to the study of theory and practical training in the techniques of state administration and the art of war. The fuller participation of everyone in the activities of the Soviets, combined with an increase in the cultural and educational level, will lead to the eradication of bureaucracy, the establishment of public self-government, and the extinction of state coercion. Given the enormous influence of mass media, agitation and propaganda on public consciousness, the Workers' Party of Russia advocates that they should help everyone to acquire spiritual values, a healthy lifestyle, and participation in governance. It is inadmissible to use the press, radio and television to manipulate public consciousness, to instill reactionary views, soullessness and immorality. 5. For freedom, peace and progress. The Workers' Party of Russia advocates a foreign policy designed to ensure favorable international conditions for Russia's independent state development. It stands for the revival of the USSR and the closest alliance and cooperation with the socialist countries for mutually beneficial relations with all states. The party resolutely rejects attempts to condition these relations on the capitalization of our country or its support for the gendarme policy of world imperialism. The active use by the aggressive bloc of imperialist powers, led by the USA, of a powerful, state-of-the-art military machine, its claims to the territorial integrity of Russia, make it vital to take care of the Soviet armed forces and to ensure the country's defense capacity. The Workers' Party of Russia stands for an army and navy that are national in character and method of formation, international in composition, for equipping them with everything necessary for the defense of the fatherland, for a parity reduction of armaments against chaotic conversion, for a settled life and fair remuneration of the servicemen's labor. Only united Soviet armed forces can provide the peoples of our country with a reliable defense of their freedom and peace. The Workers' Party of Russia regards the unity of the workers of all countries as the main guarantee of freedom, peace and progress. The call for this unity is the meaning of the communist slogan, "Proletarians of all countries unite." The Workers' Party of Russia advocates the formation of a union of communist and workers' parties of the USSR, considers itself a part of the world communist and workers' movement, supports the just struggle of peoples for liberation from social and national oppression. Human progress is unstoppable. The program of the Workers' Party of Russia is a program for the revival of the country, based on the recognition of the objective regularity of the movement of mankind towards communism. The course of unity of the workers for the free development of all, corresponding to this regularity, can be pursued if the Workers' Party of Russia is a party which is the vanguard of the working class and therefore of all workers, uniting scientific socialism with the workers' movement, with the workers' struggle for the destruction of social inequality, for the free all-round development of all members of society. A party which is the vanguard of the working class and therefore of all workers, uniting scientific socialism with the labor movement, with the struggle of workers for the destruction of social inequality, for the free all-round development of all members of society. a party whose members take the interests of social development as their own, unselfishly give their energies to the cause of the emancipation of labor, and have no privileges. A party in whose governing bodies, including the highest governing body, the Congress, the majority belongs to the workers. A party mastering the dialectic, developing and propagating the socialist Marxist-Leninist ideology, and fighting the bourgeois ideology, not tolerating in its ranks liquidators, opportunists and revisionists. A party of communist action, communist initiative and conscious communist discipline. A party that protects its ideological and organizational independence and is ready for united action with other parties and movements on concrete, practical questions of the struggle for the improvement of the life of the people. A party that wages political and economic struggle for the interests of the people of labor in all forms. A party that fights for power not for itself, but for the working class and the workers, organizes the construction of Soviet power, promotes its establishment and development. This revision of the program was approved by 16th Congress of the Labor Party of Russia on 13th of June 2009. The end.